Good day, Junior Techies. I'm Mrs. Brimiko. We are now going to look at Chapter 9, Cost Accounting. Now, before we start with Activity 1, just to recap, in Grade 11, the focus was on the ledger accounts. In Grade 12, the focus is going to be on the production cost statement and the notes to the production cost statement. It's also important for you to understand that you need to be able to complete an abridged income statement, which is a short form income statement. Now, if we go back to the basics, in a manufacturing business, I have 4 stock accounts, and it's important to understand the purpose of each one of them. We have the raw material stock account. In our raw material stock account, we calculate what is the direct materials issued, which is equal to our direct material cost. If we look at our work in process stock account, this account we will determine what is the cost of finished goods produced during this accounting period. So the work in progress is actually our unfinished goods. Then we've got our finished goods stock account. The finished goods stock account, we would calculate our cost of sales. So, raw material stock equals direct material cost. Work in process equals cost of finished goods produced. Finished goods stock account, we calculate our cost of sales. Then we have consumables on hand or indirect materials on hand. It's important to understand whatever was left over at the end of last year must be added to our expense. Whatever is left over at the end of this year must be subtracted. Then we've got different cost accounts. There are 5 different cost accounts. We have our direct material cost, direct labor cost, and factory overhead cost, which forms part of the factory department. Then we have our administration cost, which forms part of the administration department, and then selling and distribution cost, which forms part of the selling and distribution department. It is imperative that you understand that when we look at our transactions, we complete the transactions during the accounting period. At the end of the year, we need to do adjustments, and then in a manufacturing business, those expenses is closed off to a cost account. Now, if we look at question 1.1 concepts, choose the cost account in column B that matches the description in column A. 1.1.1, depreciation on factory equipment for the accounting period is number C. It forms part of my factory overhead cost. Question 1.1.2, advertising for the accounting period. This is number D. It forms part of my selling and distribution cost. 1.1.3, the cost of raw materials that are not directly involved in the manufacturing process is number A. It forms part of my indirect material cost. 1.1.4, bank charges for the accounting period is number B. It forms part of my administration cost. Question 1.2, Woodward manufacturers. Woodward manufacturers produce and sell wooden tables. The financial year ends 31 March 2022. Required, prepare the production cost statement for the year ended 31 March 2022. And question 1.2, complete the following notes to the production cost statement for the year ended 31 March 2022. So we need to complete the direct material cost, direct labor cost, factory overhead cost, cost of finished goods sold. If I look at the information provided, they provided me with a list of balances at the end of the financial year. summary of transactions in the financial year, and then we've got additional information. So I'm going to show you now how to approach this when you get this type of question in a test or an exam. We are going to start with the notes to the production cost statement. If I look at the list of balances at the end of the financial year, what have they provided me with? The opening stock for direct material cost. They provided me with the closing stock, so I'm going to fill it in brackets because you don't know if there is an adjustment to it. If we go through the list of transactions, raw materials purchased, 950,000. Where do we take it? To direct material cost, net purchases. Carriage on raw materials purchased, 72,000. Again, I'm writing it in brackets because there might be an adjustment, which means we need to adjust these totals. Then we've got carriage on sales. It has nothing to do with these cost accounts. Indirect materials, do not forget the opening stock or that which was left over at the end of last year must always be added to my expense this year. Purchase of indirect materials for the factory must be added to the indirect materials. Returns on indirect materials for factory must be subtracted, so we're just going to say minus. Then we've got wages for factory workers. This must go to direct labor cost, and I'm going to show it in brackets. UIF contributions will be added to the direct labor cost. Pension fund contributions will be added to direct labor cost. Remember that we are busy with expenses. Everything that is deducted will go to the fund account. That is a liability. What is our expense is the gross salary or wage plus the contributions. The factory manager will be in factory overhead cost and indirect cost. Insurance, 115,500. Water and electricity for the factory, so we're just showing the amount in brackets. And then we have our rent and we show the amount in brackets because we need to see if there was any adjustments. Now you would notice sales staff and administration staff is left over. Why? Because this forms part of the selling and distribution department and the administration department. The purchase of new equipment is an asset. What is an expense to the business is a depreciation, which we're going to calculate later on. If we look now at this adjustment, no entry has been made for the carriage on raw materials bought on 20 March 2022, 4,050. This simply means we are going to add it to the carriage on purchases. Then, a calculation error was made during the stock take of raw materials on 31 March 2022. 10,000 units with a cost of 80 cents was recorded at a cost price of 8 Rand. The error must be corrected. This means we need to adjust the closing stock. So what happened now? We've shown it as 10,000 times 8 equals 80,000. It is supposed to be 10,000 times 80 cents, which is 8,000. This means that we have overstated this by 72,000. You could have also said 8 minus 80 cents equals 7 Rand 20 and then times it by 10,000 units. It will provide us with exactly the same answer. This means we need to say closing stock minus 72,000. If we look at the next adjustment, only 60% of the water and electricity has been allocated to the factory. It was supposed to be 80%. So just be careful with this one. Don't just take the amount which was given and times that by 80%. We first need to work out 106,500 divided by 60 times 100. What was it before we distributed it? And then we're going to times that by 80%. The amount is supposed to be 142,000. This means we need to adjust it by adding 35,500. Adjustment number 5. The factory wages of the last week in the financial year have not yet been recorded. This means we need to add it. The net wage for the week were 12,210. The deductions on these wages are as follows. So you need to be careful here. What must be added is the gross, which means we need to calculate it. So if I look at the percentages, it equals 26%. So 100 minus 26% means we need to take the net and we're going to say times 100 divided by 74 because we want to know what is the gross wage. That will be added to the factory wages indirect labor cost. To calculate now, the pension fund, which is 7%, we can say times 7 divided by 74. This must be added to the pension fund contributions. Then we've got the UIF. Again, we can take the net and just say times 1 divided by 74. And that must be added to the UIF contributions. Once you've calculated the gross, you could have used the gross as well to calculate the pension fund contribution and to calculate the UIF. Remember, pay as you earn. We do not contribute towards the pay as you earn. Depreciation on equipment must still be recorded at 15% on cost. 85% of the equipment are utilized in the factory. So they provided us with the equipment balance in the beginning and accumulated depreciation on equipment. New equipment was purchased on 30 November 2021. This means we need to calculate depreciation, which is our expense, on the new plus the old. So if we look at the new, 400,000 times 15% times 4 divided by 12. Old, 1,250,000 times 15%. The total must now be times 85% because 85% of equipment are utilized in the factory. This will be my total depreciation for factory equipment. The rent for March 2022 is still outstanding. The rent was increased on 1 February 2022 by 5% per annum. Rent should be divided according to the floor space utilized by the different departments. So this means we now first need to find out what is the monthly rent that should be added. Now we cannot take the total given to us and divide it by 11. Why? Because it increased by 5% on the 1st of February. So if I look at a timeline, 1 month is still outstanding. If the rent increased on the 1st of February, it means that for 1 month, it was at 105%. 100 plus 5 equals 105. So if you use X This will provide you with the amount before the increase. Then we still need to times it by 105%. Of course, if you've taken 5% and then added, you would get exactly the same answer. Another method that you can use, we can say for 10 months, it was at 100%. For 1 month, it was at 105%. If I'm using this method, I can get the answer which I'm looking for. What was the amount after the increase? Because then we're just going to say times 105 divided by 1,105 times the total rent. It will provide you with exactly the same answer. If 1 month is still outstanding, it means 1 month must be added, but now this must be distributed according to floor space. This is why we say 1,600 divided by 2,000. This will equal the total rent that was spent on the factory department by factory overhead cost. 70% of the insurance relates to the factory. The rest should be divided equally between the administration and selling and distribution department. This means that we're going to take insurance and we're going to times that by 70%. Now, do not forget about my indirect materials. We've now done all the adjustments. Whatever is left over at the end of this year must be subtracted from my expense account. Now we can close all the brackets. So if we start with direct material cost, our total net purchases, 950,000, there were no adjustment. Carriage on purchases, you need to add those two together. This means that opening stock plus net purchase plus carriage on purchases equals, now we need to subtract our closing stock. That equals our direct material cost. My total factory wages, just add those two together, plus pension fund contribution plus UIF contributions equals direct labor cost. Factory overhead cost, the factory manager's salary, there were no adjustment, so that equals the total at the end. Indirect materials, make sure that you always show your calculation. It's the balance in the beginning plus the purchases minus the returns minus that which was left over at the end of this year, plus water and electricity, plus insurance, plus rent, plus depreciation equals my total factory overhead cost. Now we can complete the production cost statement. Direct material cost plus direct labor cost equals my direct prime cost plus my factory overhead cost equals my total manufacturing cost plus work in progress in the beginning of the year equals, now work in progress stock at the end is a question mark. So I've got two unknowns, which means I cannot solve it. We first now need to look at cost of finished goods sold. Opening stock is given to me. Closing stock is given to me, so I must put it in brackets. Then they said to me, cost of finished goods sold, cost of sales, they provided me with a markup percentage of 100%. They provided me with the sales, which means I can calculate the cost of sales by taking the sales amount times 100 divided by 200. Once I've calculated my cost of sales, we can now work backwards, which means opposite calculations. Take the cost of sales plus closing stock equals. Now we can calculate the cost of finished goods produced during the year. So the difference, that total, must go to my production cost statement. Once we've calculated that, we can calculate the work in progress at the end of the year, the difference between those two. Thank you very much. Next, we're going to look at activity 2. I want to leave you with this quote. Stay positive, work hard, and make it happen. Have a wonderful day.